Fellow tennis nerds, I hope you're well. Today I am joined by a returning guest, my friend Ashley Neaves, aka the tennis mentor. We spent a few hours together in Wimbledon, but we had no time to record anything, and we were enjoying the tennis, obviously. So we're doing it today instead. Ashley has had two recent milestones that we have to give him huge congrats for. One is reaching 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, meaning he gets that famous plaque, and the other one is launching something called the Tennis Training Deck that we'll also talk about today. But we have to start. How are you today, Ashley?
Very well. This is an early start for you, I know. But no, appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I loved it last time and looking forward to getting stuck in today.
When it comes to YouTube and your journey there, now 100,000, it's been your goal. We talked about it last time. Then it was a bit further away. It was maybe a year ago or something. So how do you feel now? Like, do you feel even more inspired to keep creating more and more engaging coaching content? Do you ever feel like you get a bit of like brain fog? What should I do? What should I come up with the next month? What's your feeling around YouTube now?
Yeah. So as far as the goal, I try not to look at the numbers too much. I think I mentioned to you last time.
Yeah.
Um, the only reason, well, I say the only reason, it's amazing to be at 100K, but the main reason was to get that silver play button because I want to kind of put it somewhere behind me over there. But yeah, I think as someone who's making videos, it's quite important to not worry so much about the numbers. As you know, it's some of my or some of the videos that I create that I feel are the most valuable get the least views, and I spend a lot of time trying to, really build a video that's going to help the viewer at the other end and really make the biggest difference to their game. But sadly, the algorithm prefers the other videos that are kind of clickbaity, and so yeah, the numbers for me are less important. It's more about creating value and making sure that there's something that the viewer can learn from the video, and it's kind of what I was going back to there when I talk about the biggest benefit a player is going to get from their tennis is working on their anticipation and their movement, also their tactical intentions, more so than technique. But everybody that's watching the videos wants to look at something technical, and so I do try to put that into my videos a bit because technique is important for some parts of your game. But when it comes to the nuts and bolts of winning matches, it's more about your tactical intention and the way that you move around the court.
Yeah, I find that really fascinating because I think, based on my experience as well, is that like if people just want like quick fixes, right? So, three easy steps to improving your forehand, which is, can be good. Like some people might not know this thing, and you might be forgetting about a certain like way to prepare. But in essence, like even if you have a bad looking shot, if you can place it properly and move around it properly, then you will probably win matches that maybe you don't think you should win, right? So, but in my experience, those kind of the drills are not as sexy for the audience. They don't want to watch them as much. Is that your feeling too?
Totally, totally. I mean, if you think of, there are some I won't actually mention names, but there's a lot of pro players out there that technically you'd look at them as a coach and feel that they're not doing a good job, but they're putting the ball in a position that's in play and awkward for their opponent. And it's down to their anticipation, the way that they read the game and the way that they move around the court. Um, the two main reasons why you might want to work on something technically is injury prevention. I think there's a lot to be said for that. If you're playing with bad technique, it can create injuries, especially common ones like tennis and golfer's elbow. Um, but equally efficiency as well. So it might be that a certain technique that a player is playing with is creating limitations within their game. But I think for me first, it's really developing the physical side of the game and the ability to move into positions that allow you to execute good technique, firstly, and actually then understanding how to put the ball into a certain position. If I think about technique versus tactics, a technical intervention that I might make would always be to do with the racket or the body. A tactical intervention is always to do with the ball. And I always say to my players, if they're struggling to get their forehand in play from a certain position, prioritize what the ball is doing first before looking at technique. So it might be something as simple as aiming higher over the net with their shot. They're not thinking technically about how to execute it. They're thinking about what they're doing with the ball. But that will normally fix the technical issue that they have. It will increase the steepness of their swing path, or it would, change the way that they take the racket back. So I often try to get a player to change what the ball is doing as a priority first. If they're still making mistakes, then looking at the technique, because that's far easier to achieve in a match as well. You know, if you're playing a match against me and you're thinking about your grip and your swing path and all of these things, you're going to break down, especially when it gets to a tight situation. But if you're prioritizing what the ball's doing, you know, trying to create good shape over the net or hitting the big parts of the court, you're going to perform better on the match court as well.
I think that's a great tip and something that few of us like think about. Like I think there's so many players that overthink technique. You know, I know a lot of players overthink gear. That's also a thing, but that's like related to technique because they think, you know, if I have this racket that would feel better, it would help my swing or it would help my, you know, my shots would be heavier. So that's, you know, I don't have to do any work technically. But then there's equally as many as who overthink technique. I have many friends who are like really obsessed with tennis and it's all they think about is technique. And then we get into playing points that is in their way, right? Like they cannot think about where to place the ball because they're always thinking about how am I hitting the forehand? How am I hitting the backhand? And that becomes like a big issue because overthinking is pretty bad for you overall, you know, in life. So I think that's a great tip. Is this something you encounter like with most of your students? Like you have students of all ages, right? Like kids to, I guess, veterans.
Yeah, definitely. And across the board, level wise as well. You know, I work with beginners still. I work with players that are playing futures events as well. So it's a really wide spectrum of players. And I would say that it's funny that the lower level, club level players that I work with, lots of them do watch YouTube videos. And it's funny because I'm in this world of creating videos, but lots of the time they'll come to me and they'll say that they've seen something about racket lag on the forehand or the waiter's tray on the serve. And so it's kind of, I've got to develop a skill as a coach to work around that and give them something that's going to help them with the root of the problem as opposed to the cosmetics and the aesthetics of a shot. And don't get me wrong, I really enjoy getting into the technical chat. Some of these players that I play with are really technically minded and analyze their game, and I do enjoy it. I've come from a very heavily technical focused background as a young coach, and I've had to undo lots of that learning to really help players to improve their game. So it is a problem, but I think you know, if they're working with a coach, that coach can help to educate them to focus on the right things.
How important would you say, like, that's, I think, related to, almost to your deck, right? Like, how important is match play in your training sessions, like playing points, to drills? Like, should people do more drills? How much of drills should it be, like, in percentage compared to, like, playing points or matches?
Yeah, great question. And I don't think there's one simple answer for that. But I think if you are a player that's, you know, primarily doing match play and you're not seeing big changes in your results, then you should probably make a shift and do a bit more training, a bit more drills based work. And still with a competitive theme, you know, it's not that you're just going out of the basket and training a stroke, but it's like, right, if you're only playing match play, let's do some drills that are more conditioned points where you're setting up a certain situation that you want to develop and playing the points out from there. You know, so I think, yeah, look at the balance that you currently have. If you're not feeling an improvement in your game or you're feeling a plateau, that might be a time to make a shift. You know, the same goes for if you're a player that's mainly doing coaching or mainly doing drills based things, you really need to be playing match play. And I would say match play as a whole is more important for most players. You know, if you're a player that's not doing any match play, you're really not going to improve your competitive skills. I actually got to interview Andy Murray recently, which was an unbelievable experience for me. He's like the best person I've ever interviewed because he's just so open to giving honest responses. And one of the things that he was talking about was as a junior, he would do a lot of games based drills. He would do a lot of group sessions as opposed to one sessions. And he played a lot of match play. And this guy's one of the most strategically minded players that's, you know, ever played. And he's developed his ability to win matches by playing matches and playing with other players and doing lots of games like that. So yeah, I do think that you should probably sway more towards match play, but have a goal, have an intention within that match play. Don't just play on autopilot because you'll get the same results, but actually have a focus, whether that's, you know, in this match, I want to hit deeper with my ground strokes. In this match, I want to find my forehand more after my serve. Having a focus like that around a process rather than a result is going to help massively.
It's pretty cool that you interviewed Andy Murray. I think, especially when the players have retired, they are a lot more open to being, open about themselves and their careers instead of like when you're a competitive player, you're thinking only about that and you want to may probably get away from the interview and to the practice court or to your phone or whatever. But I feel like he has a lot to give, probably as a coach. Maybe not to Novak as we saw with the results, but as a little bit of a special partnership. What do you think is in store for Andy? Like, do you think he's gonna join a player, or what's gonna happen with Andy Murray?
So actually, the best response I had from him was when I asked him. I said, "What did you learn about yourself when coaching Novak?" And he was so open. I mean, the response he gave me was shared across so many media platforms, and it was in the news and all sorts. Because he actually said that Novak was asking for technical help, and Andy didn't feel like he could give it to him. Andy is a phenomenal player, so analytical, so strategically minded. Um, but because he's come from a playing background, he didn't really know how to translate that into giving Novak technical support. And he was honest about it. And I think that's quite refreshing to hear, because lots of people assume that as a fantastic player, you should be a fantastic coach. What Andy said is he's actually going to go back to basics, and he's going to learn how to coach. He's going to speak to one of his past coaches, Louis Kaya, who's one of the best doubles coaches in the world. He's been in tens of Grand Slam finals with his players. I think more than 20 actually. He's coached some of the best doubles players in the world, and Andy said that he's going to ask Louis for help with his game. So it sounds like Andy wants to do some coaching. He said he'd like to help some British tennis players. So it would be awesome to see him with Jack or Emma. But yeah, he's going to get back to work first before getting on with them.
That sounds like a very Andy Murray approach because he always was a hard worker and he always wanted to put in the hours in the gym and also maybe tactically, strategically, because he understands tennis really well. You can see that in the way he plays, but also when you've seen interviews with him, like the one you did, for example, he's a thinker, and he's very interesting to listen to. And I think that was insightful because I would also, expect if Novak Djokovic asked you as a kind of competitor from that time where they were like playing many finals and so on, you wouldn't want like technical advice. He wouldn't want that. He would want like, okay, can you give me what would you do in this situation or something? But technical advice was probably the least or furthest from my head. Like why would you ask me for technical advice? You're Novak Djokovic.
Yeah, I mean, even any player at that level, you would not expect many technical changes at all. I know Novak's made tweaks to his serve, throughout his career, earlier on in his career actually. But by the time these players are, the greatest players of all time, like Novak, you'd expect it to be more mentally and tactically based. How can I get the edge over this player, for example, which Andy would have been brilliant at. So it's really, really interesting to hear that Novak wanted technical help. And I think it's probably coming more from a mental perspective. He wanted to feel, maybe he wanted a bit of reassurance from Andy, just to say, look, your forehand's great or your backhand's great. And just to have that reassurance to help him more mentally, because honestly, I don't think Novak needs any technical tweaks.
No, it would be tough to see them, but I've seen his training sessions here in Marbella, and I do feel like he sometimes like really relies on the coach to tell him something about how his wrist is cocked during the forehand. I've seen that like literally like that he was missing long and then did a minor change and then he got pissed with his coach because the coach didn't say anything. He had to figure it out himself. So I could see it being a little bit of something he would like sometimes. I think he's a perfectionist, and then sometimes when you a little bit off, you would need help from your box. And these days, I think if you're in the coaching box, you can get blamed for all kinds of stuff. It would generally be a thing like where I think we talked about that in Wimbledon. It's like if you're in the player box with some players, you're going to be the target of some pretty heavy assault during the matches. Like, what do you think about that? And how do you feel like as a coach, if you would ever travel around on the tour with an ATP 100 guy or 200 guy, how would you like think about that situation?
Honestly, as it stands, I'm not a huge fan of on-court coaching. My view on that would flip if they were mic'd up as a viewer. I think that would be incredible. if the coach was mic'd up and you can hear exactly what they're talking about. But from a real life perspective, when you're sat, I've been on court with a couple of my friends, and I was on court with you at Wimbledon, next to a coach of a player, it's stressful, and it's the coach really can't give, you know, good information or correct information all of the time. Quite often they're going to give an answer that is a great answer, but if the player then tries to execute that said tactic and misses, they're going to feel like they need to blame the coach. And so I think tennis has always been a problem-solving sport. It's one-on-one, and I do feel that players are starting to rely more and more on their coaches, and it's actually affecting negatively. So from that perspective, I think it's difficult, to be fair.
Yeah, I'm not like I was for it in the sense that if it's something we can use as a media thing, right? Like exactly like you say, if we mic them up, we add extra elements. Some tennis matches are like watching paint dry, But if you have people talking to their coaches mic'd up, that would be exciting because, like, okay, he's getting information, we're hearing this. This is gonna be exciting to witness. Like, can he execute the game plan? But right now, like, if we talk about the Wimbledon situation, you're in a box, but the player is on the other side of the court, so you cannot even talk to him when he has a sit down, right? So if you're gonna be coaching, you would like to sit close to the player, so every time he sits down, you can be like, hey man, the second serve is not working, you have to do this. And now you can't because you have to scream from the other side and he's not listening, and then he's just looking at you angrily or whatever. So it's like, it's a strange, I think they went for it, but they didn't go the whole way. And I think if you do something, you probably have to do 100% because now we're feeling like we're in some 60% territory and it's not really working. And like you said, the players are expecting quite a lot from the coach, which is putting them in a weird situation. Like, it's very difficult to solve a player's problems when you're on the court because he's the guy playing. So it's a tricky situation, and you probably will see more coaches get fired quickly now because of that.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting dynamic is if you work with a player for many years, the communication can be much easier. You can be completely open and honest with the player. But I think if we go back to kind of Andy and Novak, for somebody new coming into Novak's team, for example, they want Novak to feel positive things about them. So they're going to say things that Novak wants to hear, not things that Novak needs to hear. And I often see this with kind of new coaches that go into teams. It can be difficult for them to gel with a player because they are not saying what they need to say. They're saying what wants to be heard. And the interesting one is I saw recently that Agassi's joined Holger's team. And that will be interesting because Agassi really doesn't need to do this. So I feel like he might be a bit more honest with how he talks to Holger, which I think would be a good thing for him.
Yeah, I think a guy like Agassi, after listening to him commentate and stuff, like also reading his book, I think he is probably a very good influence to have in your team because like he doesn't seem like a guy who would hold back, or would be like careful about his own image or careful about the money relationship with a player. He doesn't need that. So it's the same with Ivanisevic and Tsitsipas, right? Like Ivanisevic felt like Stefanos needed to hear this stuff, so he said it to him, and then it also got into the press, which was maybe not the best thing, but at the end of the day, he was like honest at least, So that's the only thing you can expect as a player. You would want honesty. You wouldn't want someone to be sugarcoating, and then you're losing, and you're not getting any help from the guy you're paying.
Yeah, totally. But it's there's not many players on the tour now that have a consistent coach. A friend of mine, Ben Reeves, coaches a British girl, Sonne, and they've been together since she was 5 years old, which is very, very rare to spend the whole journey with a player. But it really shows on the court. They've got a mutual respect. They know when to talk to each other. They know what information to give. So it massively helps. And unfortunately, that's becoming more and more rare on the tour.
Yeah, I think that's great when you have that. It feels like, it's like almost like a co-parent or some kind. Like you really have that relationship where you understand and the history behind certain shots or everything. That's what you want to see. I mean, when you're getting these high-profile coaching relationships, that's like usually lasting 3 months now or 6 months. I mean, we've seen a lot of them recently. Novak used Agassi for a while. It was pretty good. Or Becker for 3 years. That seemed to work. But then you have now had quite a few of them that is like 3 months, Zverev, Rune, Tsitsipas, few players who have like brought in big names, but it doesn't really work out. Like I think it's maybe like too much, too many expectations, or just a mismatch personally. So it seems like a quite difficult one. You would rather have your same like childhood coach in the box instead of that.
I think the common theme is these players that do go through the coaches quite frequently have heavily involved parents. I don't know how much that impacts it, but it seems to be a kind of common denominator.
Yeah, 100%. The tennis parents are famous, and I'm sure you encounter them. How is your tennis parent situation over where you coach? I mean, you still coach. Is it 30 hours or is it 25 hours now? Yeah.
Still 30.
Yeah.
It's I love it, and I won't ever trade coaching in for YouTube, but I probably need to find a better balance. But yeah, tennis parents are great, and I think it's you have to find a way to work together to make it work for the player. Um, and I think there is a fine line between having a parent that kind of supports their child and a parent that almost pushes their child. Um, so yeah, it can be difficult, but I think as long as the relationship is managed early on, it can help. And that's why these longer relationships with a player and a coach can be much better, because also it's a relationship with the parents and the family as a whole. You become, you all understand how things work. Whereas often when you have a really pushy parent, they always feel like the grass is greener, so they'll look for another coach and another coach. And because they don't have a consistent coach, that coach can't help to educate the parent, and it's kind of an ongoing cycle. So yeah, it's an interesting one, but tennis parents are very, very powerful in a player's journey, because they spend a lot more time with the kid than the the coach does. And so as long as you can get them on board with the same messaging, then it can help a lot.
Yeah, I think that's key, and I think more that you can influence the parent in a good way, because some parents are obviously like so important for the kid's success because they put in all the money, all the hours. Some parents are super hard on their kids, and that can be difficult to watch and be a part of. But some parents are just like loving, and maybe they don't really like understand tennis so well, so they really need that help from the coach. So the more you can influence, I think the better. But some parents will definitely not be open to having too much influence either. They want to be the one running the show, and that's what we see also on tour, like in some relationships, you know. So as you evolve as a coach, like in your journey, you said like you were very technical, and now you're definitely more tactical, strategical, and trying, I guess, to problem solve a bit more, trying to identify. Is that something you've seen in your journey? Like where do you see yourself going, like in the next few years?
Um, Good question. I never plan too far ahead. Um, it's I kind of go with the flow a little bit. I do everything that I do to the best of my ability, and then, you know, various things pop up, and I'll kind of make a decision and take that route. But for me, I think I'm coming becoming more and more basic with what I'm delivering. So, like I say, I used to be very technically minded. I was quite into maths and science at school, so I liked factual things, and so biomechanics really got me thinking when I was younger. But as I've progressed as a coach, and as I've found what works and what doesn't work, and what gets results, it's really simplifying things, talking less, listening more. Um, so that's how my kind of coaching philosophy has developed. As far as what I'm going to be doing in the future, I think I do miss working at a higher performance level. So I've started doing a little bit of work with a player who's playing lower level pro tournaments, futures tour, that sort of thing, kind of behind the scenes. So more watching match footage and giving feedback remotely. I'll possibly go and watch a couple of their events in the coming months. So it's nice to be able to dip my feet back into that higher level of tennis, because I think I've got a lot of skills in that area that almost at club level I don't get to use. But I don't see myself being a traveling tour coach. It's a very, very different lifestyle, and for me, it's nice to have a base where I can feel that I'm making a real difference with a lot of players rather than just one. Um, but I never say never. I think yeah, let's see what happens in the next few years.
Yeah, there's a fun element to being on like tour and traveling, but it's like it's grueling, of course. Like you're always lugging suitcases around, you're staying in hotels. It's not, and then like maybe on the Futures tour, it's a little bit less luxury feeling to it, you know. But if you're playing with if you're going with an ATP guy, it might be a bit better. But still, like you're stuck together for better and worse, and you have to kind of deal with their emotions all the time and be like a bit of a psychologist slash parent slash, depending on how big their team is, of course. But if you're like the one coach, but also something to be fun to maybe do for like a half a year or something. Like you do one commitment saying, hey, I'm doing this for a year, but I'm not doing any more than that. I think that could be interesting. And I know you have skills beyond like the club player thing, because there you also have some more like skin in the game. Like when you have like a player who has to make a living from their tennis, then you become like a very vital part of that whole equation. And that can be kind of nerve-wracking, but also kind of exciting in a way, right?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I know a few tour coaches that share the job with another coach, so they're not away for 30 weeks of the year. They might be away for 15 or 20, and that sounds great. I mean, it's difficult to find something like that. The other side that people kind of don't think is from a mental point of view. As a coach, you're going through very similar emotions to the player, and pretty much every week you're going to be losing. And so if you've just got this one player, it's a tough. You've got to give a lot of positivity to the player, which saps your own positivity. You know, it can bring you down. So it's mentally very, very difficult for the coaches on tour as well as the players. And so I think if you can work with a few players, at least those, you know, there's ups and downs at different points, as opposed to kind of if one player's losing week on week and week, it's very, very difficult over a period of time.
Yeah, so what about like I mean, you talked about watching clips remotely. I've thought about this as well, because like I've been in the player boxes a few times, and you know, as kind of support friend, whatever, and you do feel what the player feels, like almost like it's and it hurts to lose a match in 5 sets or 3 sets, and you feel the disappointment in the player, and it's like really tricky to balance, like when do I try to cheer up, should I just step away? Like sometimes they need their own space, they just want to like go into the gym and not talk to anyone. That's not uncommon. And sometimes you have to be like straight on with like, yeah, let's forget about this, let's move on. But yeah, losing is a strong part of tennis. It's always there, unless you're with Novak or Carlitos or Sinner. It's like losing is not such a big problem, but for most people it is. So that's an interesting one. But maybe like coaching remotely, like you said, like having a few players and being more like a assistant coach, but more like a keen eye, and like, okay, I did notice in your match that you play like on the Challenger Tour, where you can now watch, like I had some guys on the Challenger Tour with gear, so for me it's fun to watch their matches, like, and see, okay, how is this loo changed in strings or whatever, helping the situation, and then I know them as well, so you know like what they're going through in other parts of their game as well. So how would that look? Do you think that's something that could be happen more in the future, like that kind of remote coaching, not just sending sheets of like strategy, which the data companies do, but being a bit more involved?
Yeah, I think you know, like you say, when it comes to talking to your player once they finished a match, it can be very, very difficult emotionally, and they want to spend some time on their own before, you know, you give any feedback. So on the flip side of that, if you're remotely coaching them, they send you the video. Once they send you the video, they're ready for that feedback, and so that kind of takes that out of the equation. You know, they've had a few hours to think about it. They send the footage over, and it can be just as in depth, if not more in depth, the feedback that I can give somebody when watching their match footage, because, you know, I'll watch the match, but actually I'll go back to a moment and see, you know, certain clips and repeat them, and see what happens. So in lots of ways, remote coaching can be better. Um, but I think as long as, you know, these conversations that I have with the player after seeing a match, they do go on for an hour, more than an hour. So it does take a lot of time. But I think in the future, I don't see why that can't be a good move. And also, it's expensive for players to have a coach traveling around with them, you know. But if they can send the video remotely, it can help. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for it.
Yeah, I think most matches should be recorded at this point. Like we're in this point in this professional tennis, I don't know how it is on the Future Store. I know Challenger Tour, they're pretty generous with like live streaming and being able to watch it back. But on Future Store, they should have cameras everywhere. It's cheap technology. Like you can just put like a cheap camera just recording it. You might not have to live stream it, but at least there's a recording somewhere online that you can watch it post match, right? So I think they could manage to do that. And that would help you as a coach and would be fun also for parents or not traveling with their kid or with their player so they can actually watch the match, even if it's in afterwards, you know. So it should be possible.
Totally, and they do it at some futures events, but not all of them. But yeah, I'm sure you've seen there's lots of futures venues that are pretty ropey. So obviously the budgets are pretty low, but yeah, I think it would be great. I really do.
Yeah, it's true, but that would be interesting to see for you and as a coach. As a player, were playing a tournament? Is it soon or has it already been? I'm sorry if I forgot.
Next week, actually. Yeah, next week. So I am over 35 now. So once a year in the UK, they hold something called County Cup, which is where all of the counties get together and play against each other. So I've got that team event coming up in a week and a half. That's on the grass courts in Eastbourne, so a really, really nice venue.
Wow.
But silly me, I've also entered a Wimbledon over 35s, which is the week after, which is played on the practice courts at Wimbledon. But because I haven't played any ITF events in the build up to this, I need to play one to qualify for Wimbledon. So I've entered another tournament. So I've got 3 weeks back to back.
Pro Tour.
Playing for 4 years. Yeah, exactly. So my body isn't the same as it used to be. So I might be broken in a few weeks' time.
Well, it's all on grass, I guess.
It's all on grass, yeah. So the rally shouldn't be as long. But I'll just have to hit a few serves before my first tournament just to make sure I'm hitting the spots.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. So just jump into like you do 3 weeks in a row because like some players I talk to, they do 3 weeks, then they do a few weeks, 2 weeks break, and then you go 3 weeks on tour. Like let's say. So I think that for you, your tour life now is starting with the 3-week tournament stretch. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. I mean, from a pro player's perspective, having a 3-week, let's go back a bit, actually, futures and challenger level, having a 3-week block can be good. And lots of these futures events have multiple weeks at the same venue. And so for some players, it's just, it's a little bit easier when it comes to travel. Also, they get more familiar with the venue. So by week 2 and week 3, they're feeling the ball a lot better and performing better and potentially getting more ranking points. But for me, I think the opposite is going to happen. I think week 1, I'm going to peak. And probably by day 2, my body's going to be broken and it's just going to be a downhill struggle for me as an old man.
Yeah, you're not that old. And also the other guys are the same age. So you're probably pretty fit for that age. You're going to see some beer bellies probably in that in that tournaments. But it's like usually guys, I played a bunch of events, ITFs, was a while ago now, but you do, guys are really keen on winning. Like it's a pretty intense atmosphere. You'd think like, oh, there's no prize money here or very little, if any, but people want to win like by the sword. Like they are really keen on winning. If they have to cheat, they will cheat, if it feels like college tennis sometimes. But it's generally quite fun. I know we talked about it last time. You did play like an ITF match that was a nightmare opponent, and then it's not as fun, and you start thinking like, why am I here and why am I doing this to myself? I could just be chilling or doing my normal work. But there's a thrill of competing as well, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's why I do it. I've played a couple of club matches over the past year and do no training for them because I'm just kind of on court for too many hours, and so the last thing I feel like doing is getting back on court and training. But love the thrill of being in a battle, being in a match, and I think that's the one thing I miss. So although I'm not training, it's great to get back on court and to play these matches. But yeah, like you say, these players take it seriously. I'm going into it from a different perspective. I just want to go out there and have fun, but at the same time, as soon as I step on the court and hit my first serve, it's like, right, match mode. So I'm super competitive, but when it comes to line calls, I'm probably at the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm probably a bit too lenient and nice. I want it to be a fun experience for both of us,
Yeah, I have the same philosophy. I'm like coming at it that like, okay, this is gonna be fun to compete because usually you're just hitting or testing rackets and working with some player, and now it's like, oh, fun to compete. But then the other guy has a stronger mindset of like, okay, this line, we have to discuss this line. I'm like, I don't want to discuss the line, man. Like, you can have the point. It's not that important. It's like, But sometimes you have to be. It's also a little bit of like a testosterone challenge. Like you have to be like, okay, that's it. Now you've been a dickhead for too long. Now we stop here.
Yeah.
So like that's also good challenge for you to be a bit okay. I'm a nice guy, but this is now over the limit. Like now you crossed it. So now no nice
Totally,
anymore.
and that match that you talk about, the opponent was a horrendous guy. Like, it was in the final. It was an over 30s event, so I was a little bit younger. And this player, within the first half of the first set, was getting really vocal, and it was a horrendous experience. But it fired me up in a way that I really wanted to beat him, and because of that, it kind of fired up something inside me that gave me that urge to win, and I managed to beat him. So yeah, I think sometimes bringing out a bit of internal anger can help.
Yeah, it depends on who you are. I mean, some people will melt down if they get into that anger zone, and some people will like just play even better. And that's what you see a lot, like the mental side of tennis. If we get into that, that's such an important part. Like if you can enter it with like I'm gonna have fun. I think it's easier to compete, but some players put so much pressure on themselves, and then if you have an audience, even if it's 5 people, like that feeling of choking or being like so nervous you can't hit a ball. We recently saw Anisimova in the final famously lose double bagel to Iga. I mean, we know Iga likes to give out bagels in her bakery, but still, it was a bit to see that in a pro match. Dimitrov lost to Deminor earlier in the year, also 6-love, 6-love, I think. It's or 6-love, 6-1, I don't remember. But so, do you have any advice like for players who they get so nervous or like they choke away matches like at least late in the game, like where the nerves are a bit too much on the negative spectrum?
Yeah. So number one for me is perspective, and just putting the match into perspective. It's a bit different for Anisimova playing the Wimbledon final, but for you and I, it's like, right, why are we playing tennis? We're playing as a leisure hobby. We're playing to have some fun. We're playing for fitness, whatever we're playing for. We're not playing for big money. We're not playing in front of big millions of people in the audience on TV watching. So put things into perspective, and realize what is on the line, and there's not an awful lot. So that's the first thing. I think also from Anisimova's point, if you're playing a match and you're getting crushed and it's going quickly away from you, it's like, take your time in between points, spend a bit more time at the changeovers, not to hinder your opponent, but to just give yourself a chance to kind of get back into the match a little bit. And there's a good book called Momentum in Tennis, The Hidden Force, I think it's called, by Alistair Hyam, British coach, good coach. And he talks a lot about how momentum shifts in matches, and how you can capitalize when momentum's on your side, and how you can divert it when it's working against you. And lots of it comes down to spending time in between points when it's against you, and when the momentum's with you, actually taking less time and riding that wave of momentum. And there's another point which is more from the book of Winning Ugly, which is, if you feel like you're ahead in a match, most often you get complacent. Lots of players, when they're 5-2 up, will lose a couple of games just because of whatever's going on in their head. They get a bit complacent. Andreeva had it recently in a match where she didn't realize that she'd won, and what she said was she flipped the score in her head, and she's playing point by point. So another tip is, if you're 5-2 up in a match and you have a tendency to get complacent, just try to flip the score in your head and pretend you're 5-2 down, and that's going to help you just to tighten up and close out the match, which can be tough to do. So yeah, there's lots of different coping mechanisms, but I think when it comes to dealing with nerves, I think putting things into perspective can really help, but also preparing yourself as much as you can, because if I'm thinking from my perspective, when I get nervous when I'm doing public speaking. But if I prepare well and I read through my notes and I really know what I'm talking about, those nerves go. So the same goes for tennis. If you really prepare well physically and mentally, you're going to feel much more confident going into the match.
Yeah, I think it's also a bit of a muscle memory, like being able to play a lot of matches will put you in these situations over and over again, and then you will handle them better. Now I'm talking not from Anisimova because she's played enough matches. I think in her case, it was just like a bad luck situation of the opponent playing so well, and she was rushing a bit. I think like maybe stopping to do like, there's this famous like breathing exercise that the Navy, they do that, and just like four in, four out, something like that. And like just keep making sure you calm your breathing down and calm it down. Maybe go for a toilet break, like do something.
Yeah,
Like this is for you to, especially like if you're about to be a little bit embarrassed. Like it would be better to just, I can steal 3 games. Life is better, like this, and make a competitive second set. So I think that you have to find like your game somewhere. And it's not about disrupting the opponent in like a not nice way, but it's about you not like you showing your best self like on the court, I would say.
definitely. And I think for Anisimova, it was tough. There were lots of things that kind of came together. Winning her semi-final as she did, that would have given her a massive, adrenaline rush. And it's you often find that players that have massive wins, the next match is much tougher to perform in that same way because there's a different expectation. Um, but yeah, I think naturally, Anisimova was probably thinking about the scoreline. She was thinking at 3-love, 4-love, I don't want to get bageled. And as soon as you think of the scoreline, it gets difficult. Really, in those situations when the match is running away from you, you've just got to break it down point by point. And the nice thing about the tennis scoring system is every single game you get a reset. So rather than thinking about being 4-love down, it's love all. It's the next game. And I think, if she could have, like you say, taken her time in between each point, it can be easier to break those points down into bite-sized chunks rather than thinking, right, I've got a big hill to climb.
100%. In tennis today, if we leave the mental track a little bit, like it's becoming more and more physical. We're talking about it. I'm not sure it's like data, but it seems more and more physical. There's more and more injuries. And is there a way for players on all levels, like I would say, like competitive level mainly, right, to train smarter, not harder? Like, is there a way that, do you think like we're just going to be more and more explosive and see more and more injuries? Like, where is tennis heading, like in this situation we are now?
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about pro level, I think it's become more physical because the surfaces generally are becoming more similar, slightly slower, even the grass. Rallies lasting longer, but also the average height of these players is getting bigger and bigger, but they're not serve bots anymore. They can move, and you've got these players that are over 6 foot and moving around like players that are 5'9", super agile, super balanced out of the corners. And so I think the game has evolved in a way that there are some physical beasts playing. It's a bit different at club level, slightly different demands physically. But I think just dedicating some time to more tennis specific strength and conditioning training can help at all levels. Playing in matches, like you said earlier, can help because that is the most tennis specific movements that you can do. But yeah, anytime you can work on short sprints, decelerating is just as important, if not more important than accelerating. And I think lots of players, when doing working on their speed, they'll work on running fast, but they won't work on stopping fast. And actually, it's the stopping that allows us to be really balanced through our shot and allows us to recover quicker. So I think, yeah, if you want a little hack when it comes to training your agility on the court, work on your stopping speed as well as your acceleration.
Ah, that's a good tip. Um, so do you think like the game? Do you see that evolution of the game, like also when you're coaching juniors, like from the last 5, 10 years? I mean, you've been coaching for a while, so have you seen any kind of shifts, or do you think like on that level it's more or less the same, or do you think that the game is changing?
Yeah, not so much. I think it's more similar. Throughout all of the years that I've coached, there's always, a small group of players that kind of sit at a slightly higher level than the rest of the pack. And normally they're the players that have more athletic ability. So generally speaking, it doesn't come down to who's got the nicest looking serve or forehand. It really comes down to their athletic ability. So I think the way that I've shifted as opposed to working purely on technique, it is on the movement and in the game, the way that you react and read the oncoming ball. And like I said, how quickly you can get into position and be balanced when you get there. So I try to, as although I'm not a strength and conditioning coach, I try to implement as many movement drills as possible into sessions to create an athlete, because it's much easier to develop tennis skills if you're athletic. It's much harder to develop athletic skills in a tennis robot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think the what like I would recommend most club players is to do some physical work. Like it really helps. Like even if it's like I like to do the hit training. I talk about that a lot for the members and so on. But it's like it's really helped to be stronger, like in the core and the legs, so you can actually play a bit better, because it's tough to do technical shifts and be able to last like 2.5 hours on a clay court, if you're not relatively fit. It's just and you're gonna get injured, which is happening quite frequently, right?
Just going to say, when you get to a certain level, that's the one deciding factor as to whether you win or lose. So for me, playing these tournaments coming up, I'm not going to make any technical tweaks. I'm going to think a little bit tactically about how I play, but that's going to be based on my physicality. If I'm feeling great physically, if I was super fit and my cardio was great, then I would not be smashing winners all over the place, because I want to use my strength of my cardio skills to hang in longer rallies. Whereas, if my cardio is struggling, which I'm guessing it's going to be, I haven't tested myself recently, but I'm probably going to have to try and make the point shorter. So I'm going to have to serve a bit bigger. I'm going to have to take my forehand opportunities when I get them. And so if I was to work on anything in my game, it's going to be being physically fitter and faster on the court. So I think for most players, that's the case.
Do you think, as like a coach who is so, I mean, award-winning coach, and you worked so long as a coach, can you bring that toolbox with you when you're playing a match? Like, do you feel like you can coach yourself well? Like, I think that's an interesting question, because you think, oh, this guy, he has all the answers to every situation now, or is that like clouded by the nerves of the match?
A bit of both. I think it definitely helps. I'm probably tactically a much better player now than I was when I was playing. When I say when I was playing, when I was kind of junior before I got into coaching, but I've learned so much as a coach when it comes to where to position myself, how to play tactically against certain game styles. I think that helps a lot. But what you'll see, so my tactical awareness has increased, my physical and maybe even technical side of my game decreased. So I'm probably quite similar when it comes to how I used to play. So it definitely helps. My tennis brain now is much stronger. It probably offsets all of the other parts of my game that have declined.
Yeah, it sounds reasonable. I think you will be in better physical shape than you think when you're playing, because you're on the court for many hours, and a lot of the guys are good, but they're not in the best shape. Okay, I see some players who are like ex-footballers or like they're really physical, and those guys are tough. But then on a grass court, the physicality is usually not as big as it is like when you play on clay here in Spain. You play some guy who can run for 4 hours. Like, okay, this is gonna be a grind. It's gonna be tough.
Yeah. But talking about what I was saying when I was saying my tennis brain is now offsetting my other weaknesses. When I look at these ITFs now have over 90s age groups. Some of these players are like 92, 93 years old playing competitively. They cannot run. They're walking, but they're making every ball because they know exactly where the next ball is going. So their reading skills have increased through lack of mobility on the court. And going back to the Andy Murray interview, he actually said, I asked him where his strategic brain came from. And he said it came from his weakness when he was a child. He was a very small and slight kid, not very powerful. And so he had to challenge these stronger players through finding ways to beat them tactically. So I think sometimes our weaknesses can really create strengths within our game. And so that's quite an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I've done videos about recently, and I've talked to a lot of pros about as well, is that the racket madness that I've dealt with, not so much personally, but like with other players for many years now, is also happening on the pro tour. Like players, like they want more, they look for any kind of inch. I mean, tennis is so physical; they're already super fit. They already know their strengths and weaknesses. Maybe they can work on mental. Everything can always be better. But they are getting into the head like, I need to try Sinner's racket. I need to try Alcaraz racket. And I see that they all want to try them, right? Is that something you see like from your end as well, like coaching on the lower level, like up to the futures? Like, do you feel like there's a bigger impact or a bigger thinking about rackets and gear, or do you think it's the same as it's always been?
Um, Good question. I think it's more because there are lots of videos online now, and I think tennis is this side of tennis is a lot more easy to access than it ever was before. If you think 20 years ago, people weren't really, watching YouTube videos about gear. And so they would just play with what they've got and work their game to get the best out of the piece of kit that they've got. But I think there's so many options now. There's so many different strings that you can buy. There's so many different rackets and all the technologies that these racket brands bring out, people always feel like they're missing out on the next big thing. So yeah, I think probably a certain type of person is definitely more revolving around the equipment. But there's still lots of players at the club are still playing with head TI sixes, with Kevlar strings and all sorts. So there are still some people that don't care about kit. So I think it's finding the balance, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you see a bit more on like what with the pros than I saw before, but I think in the club game it's more or less the same. I think maybe guys in around 30 to 50 can be a bit more prone to like overthinking the gear or thinking about it, because I mean there's still a lot of players using the wrong gear, but it's maybe a small, unless it's hurting you, it's not usually as big as obviously working on technique or game or strategy and stuff. For your
Yeah,
own
I
game
think
now.
going to your videos, I think you do the best job when it comes to staying true to what is really important. You review gear, so you could quite easily tell people that this is better than this and this, but you're always so honest that actually it really does come down to lots of different things. It's not just about the kit, and I think it's really important what messages that you're giving are actually helpful, because there's lots of racket reviews out there. Brands contact influencers to make a review about a certain racket, and so they only say good things about it. But the fact of the matter is, one racket isn't good for everybody, and so what you're doing is really, really important.
Yeah, I think it's at least good to be as unbiased as possible, and also to understand that like this is not going to be the shift in your game that you might be hoping for. It might be fun, but it's more of a fun thing. It's not always. I've changed maybe our like I'm trying to like look at it from like how can you just change the string, or what's like the minimal thing you can do to get more out of your game, or maybe get a bit more comfort, because like in the comfort issue for most club players is it's a huge thing, right? Like people are struggling with like using too stiff of a string and then too much tension, and that's generally it, not always the racket, right? For you, what are you playing with right now? If we get to that question, of course.
Head Speed Pro, um, with head links Tour, strung at 52 pounds, grip size 3. Um, about a year ago, tried out the Percept. So I did a shoot with Yonex and tried out all their rackets. And for me, love the Percept. And I've been kind of for the last year toying with the idea of changing. But I love it when I'm playing, but I don't feel brave enough to then use it in a real match. So I've used it a couple of times in kind of club matches, which for me are just a bit more fun. But now when I'm playing these ITFs, I'll go back to my head speed, just because I've used it for 10, 15 years and I know what I'm going to get with it. So yeah, I'm in between, slightly favouring the Head Speed Pro, but the Percept is nearby. But I prefer the colorway of the Speed Pro, so that's kind of swaying me too.
Yeah, Percepts are a bit, now they have a new colorway, but at least it's like is it the 97 or the 100D or something?
So that's another thing. So I've been toying around with both of those. The 100D probably suits me better. I like to think I can play with a 97 still, but no, 100D, I think.
And that's also very similar then to the Speed Pro, right? Like a dense pattern, 100 square
Yeah.
inch makes more sense for you. Last question. I think you have to tell me when you have to go. But tennis influencing, right? You're doing it. I've been known to do it as well. Like, how has that been for you? Like, you've done amazing things. Like, obviously, been a part of like hitting with Yannick Sinner and interviewing Andy Murray, two of the things we can mention. But there's also like always complicated, like you get last minute requests to, can you be at the US Open the week before? And you're like, well, the week before I would like to see something. And then you have to go for like a day event, and then you have to figure out your life around that kind of. How do you think about like the being an influencer as well in tennis?
I hate it. So
Yeah, the
I
same.
don't like, yeah. So I don't like the word influencer. I don't like the influencer world. You kind of, as you know, you get pulled into it a little bit, because we've built a little bit of a following. So brands see that as us being influencers. But for me, I'm a tennis coach that makes videos, and so it's a challenge, because the opportunities are incredible. Being able to hit with Sinner, return Shelton serve, interview Andy Murray. Like, for me as a tennis fan and a coach, there's nothing better. So I'm truly grateful for those experiences. But as far as influencing goes. I'm not a big fan of that world, but I am a big fan of creating really engaging videos. So, some of these opportunities do help me to do that as well.
Yeah. And do you have anything lined up? Are you going to the US Open, or are you going to do some other traveling?
So what have I got coming up? Yeah, US Open. I'm running a clinic out there. So
Cool.
that's the weekend before the main draw starts. And then on the back of that, just to make sure that I can kind of pay for my hotel, I'm going to try to do a couple of other things working around it with a couple of brands. So yeah, as you know, making these videos, it costs a lot of time, a lot of energy. I'm having to decrease the amount of hours that I coach to be able to make these videos. So I have to pay for it in some way. And so that's where the challenge comes. I don't want to be an influencer, but there are lots of things that I need to do to be able to pay for, you know, these times away from my bread and butter, my job. And it's, for me, it's really important that I stay true to why I make the videos. So if a brand asks me to make a certain video about with a certain topic, I'll always try to steer that towards something that's educational. So rather than talking about a product, it will be more about, let's say it's a string, for example. So rather than promoting a string, it will be more around educating people about the benefits of using a soft string versus a multifilament or a polyester or that sort of thing. So it's adding value, rather than just promoting a product. So that's what I try to do as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's why you're so successful, and people really gravitate towards your content because it's genuine, it's authentic, and I think that's very important. I think that the word influencer is not one we want to hear anymore, but it's like, because now there's so many, it's like content creation is everywhere, right? So it's like it's tough to use that word. Unless you're like just doing lifestyle and you have millions and millions, maybe you can be called like an influencer because it's a little bit of a different thing. But you're a tennis coach, so and that's kind of in your core. You feel it when you talk to you.
YouTube is kind of like a bit of a side hobby for me. I'm a full-time coach, so I spend hours and hours every single day working with coaches and players. And one of the biggest things that I found, mainly at club level, but I think it extends past club level, into advanced tennis players as well, is people struggle to structure their training. And I see tons of players at the club that go to the club purely for match play. So they're normally playing doubles and they get on court, they spend a couple of minutes hitting some balls, and then they get straight into match play, which is great. Match play is vital for your development and your enjoyment. But then you have the other players that rock up and never play match play. They play with a ball machine all of the time. And so, yeah, I kind of feel that there's a bit of a gap with club players and their training. You also get the players that just come to coaching as well, and they want lots of technical help. But the training deck is basically a deck of cards with 50 or 48 different drills, drills that I've used through my training, my coaching days and my playing days as well, and drills that I love to do and drills that I find effective. And the way that it came about, I was actually listening to a podcast. I'm not a professional YouTuber, so I have to learn from other people about how to make YouTube videos. And this podcast was a YouTuber talking about a product that he'd created. And he's a chef, and he's into manga and anime as well. It's a bit off-piste, but he created this deck of cards which were full of recipes in the style of these manga and anime comic books. And a kind of light bulb went off in my head and realized that I could do something for the tennis world with this. Anyway, yeah, and that's the training deck. It's started selling about a month ago, and crazy for me because I've just been working on it hard at home in my office and spending hours and hours kind of creating these drills and putting them together. And it's now in 55 different countries. So a very, very proud moment for me.
Really cool. And I think the idea is great because, as you say, when you're around the clubs, people are usually always going into the same pattern every time. So they always like, okay, we always warm up 5 minutes and then we play a match. The same two guys also. So, if for tennis development, you should play with different players. That's generally a good idea. But people get really stuck in their route. So I think it's great to have something challenging them and say, even if you have the same partner every week, at least you can do something different. Like you can try a different game, a different drill, or work on something in your game. So I think that it's also quite portable, so it's very easy to just lug around. So I thought it was really cool and like a very functional, because it's tough to come up with something new in tennis, but this one seems quite new and different in a way.
Yeah, I think there are lots of tennis products out there in the world now. And actually, I wasn't planning on creating one because I find lots of these kind of training aids can be quite gimmicky. And I really the content that I create, I try to help people in the most practical and functional way to really make a difference to their tennis. And this idea just happened by chance. I've explored lots of different ways to create lesson plans for my players. I've got a folder of different drills that I use, but you can't really take a big folder out onto court. And I've used apps as well. There's lots of apps out there which can be good when you're in the mode of kind of using that app, but often these apps get lost. If you scroll through your phone, you don't really use them. And the one thing lots of people have asked me is, will you make this into an app? And right now, as I stand, it's a no, because I feel that getting your phone out on court is the last thing you want to do. It can create a bit of a distraction. So, yeah, like you say, super portable, keep it in your tennis bag. And so far, the feedback that I've had has been incredible. But for me, the way that I use it with my players, I use it a lot in my group coaching sessions and my one-to-ones. And I use it in different ways. So some days I will create a lesson plan where I kind of pick out the cards that I want to use before the session if I have a really clear goal with the player. But then quite often in my group sessions, especially with the kind of performance junior players, they love picking out the cards themselves. So, if one player's pushing themselves really hard and working hard and listening well, it might be that they get to pick out the next drill. So there's different ways you can do it. You can randomize it or pick out the drills beforehand.
Yeah, that's great. So from your idea to creating this deck, like what was the process like, and was it really like an arduous one, or did it go pretty smoothly? Usually, like developing product takes some time, you know.
Yeah, it took nearly a year, I would say, all in all. The good thing was all of the drills I use on a daily basis. So the drills were all in here. The tricky part was putting them onto paper. And then the even more difficult part was getting the graphic designer that I worked with to understand it, because he wasn't a tennis player. So I would hand draw out these drill diagrams, which made sense in my head as a tennis player, but I needed to make sure that somebody that had never seen the drill before would understand it. And then, so when I sent these hand drawn images to the graphic designer, there were quite a lot of back and forths, because he made it look brilliant visually, but it might be that the arrow was slightly in the wrong position and it just needed to be super clear. So yeah, that part took the longest. I'm quite a visual person. The reason I've kind of created this YouTube channel is I'm quite artistic as well. So I enjoyed the design process, but it did take some time. But yeah, so a year all in all, but it was definitely worth it, because the manufacturing of it was super important too. I mean, it's like a really good quality print, and if I get the cards out as well, this is how they look. So this is one of the drills. This one is bow tie match, which lots of you guys watching will probably be familiar with. But yeah, each one, as you can see, has a very different format. So the actual diagram looks different on each and every card. So yeah, that was what took the longest, really.
Yeah, and how do you recommend? Let's say you have two guys who are playing every week. They're playing once or twice. How would they use it? Like, what would they just pull a card out for every time? Would they put maybe 20 minutes to that, and then they play a set? Or how would you recommend you structure it?
So initially, I'd recommend kind of going through every single card to familiarize yourself with it, because there'll be some drills that you know very well. There's classic drills that are used a lot, the two cross one line and the bow tie match that you just saw. And what I recommend, so there's 4 different colors. The blue color is a focus cue. And so there are 6 focus cues. You would pick one of these at the start of a session. Whether you do that or not is up to you. I like to do it. So an example of a focus cue is beat the bounce. So this is making sure that whatever drill that you're doing within the session, whether you're playing the drills or playing matches, your priority is to beat the bounce. So thinking about your preparation, making sure that you're fully set up before that ball bounces on your side of the court. The 6 focus cues are very, very generic, allowing you to really focus on something that will make a difference to your game. Because there are tons of things you can focus on for you specifically, Jonas. You know, in your game, it could be something more technical. But I wanted it to be used for everybody. So there is one card which is called the Technician. So this card, if you wanted a technical goal within your session, it's down to you to pick that out. You know, if you work with a coach or if you know something within your game that you want to work on technically, that would be your priority for the session. So you pick out one of the blue cards, then you pick out 1 or 2 of these activator cards. So these are warm-up drills effectively. And all of these warm-up exercises not only train your body for action, but get your brain activated as well. So I've created them to make sure that at the start of the session, your brain is ready to make decisions. Because quite often players will do a physical warm-up and, you know, their heart's pumping, they're ready for action physically, but they get on the court, they just start rolling the ball back and forth. And when they start playing, they wonder why they're not performing to their best ability. So it's really important to warm up the brain as well. Then you'll pick out 2 or 3 cooperative drills. So that's these yellow cards. These are designed for you to kind of hone your skills, to work on something within your game whilst working together with your partner. And then finally, you'll pick out a couple of these red cards, which are competitive drills. And these are the ones that most players find fun. So if you're kind of competitively minded, you'll pick out more of those and get into action with games-based drills. And yeah, for me, training should be very much games-based, is why I talk about ball machine practice. Ball machine is great if you're wanting to refine something technical within your game. But the biggest problem players have when it comes to performing well on the match court is actually their positioning and their shot selection. Those 2 things are the main reasons why players make mistakes. And so anytime you want to work on something technically, rather than getting a coach to feed you the same ball every single time or using a ball machine, I'm a big advocate for getting on court with another human being at the other end that sends you a variety of different shots, which is why all of these drills are games-based where you play with another human.
Yeah, I think that's the most fun way to learn. And we all know that, like, if you have a drill and you count points, it's much better than just hitting cross. You know, like, that's generally more fun, even if it's the butterfly or whatever name you would call it. But it's, I think that's great to gamify the experience a bit, because you need to get people somewhat excited about something. Otherwise, we tend to be quite lazy. We tend to go always to the same patterns. So I think it's good to have something challenging you a little bit, but still has that element of fun to it, you know.
Definitely. And also when I talk about a kind of games-based approach to my coaching, it's not just about gamifying within the competition side, but also receiving a variety of different balls. Tennis is a sport that, is a 360-degree sport. You're moving in all directions, and having to read and anticipating a moving ball is difficult. And so that's why I recommend, even with young kids, as much as possible, to try to have another player at the other end hitting the ball back. It can be messy sometimes, especially with kids. You're dealing with junk balls a lot of the time, which is why players tend to prefer playing with a ball machine or a coach. That can make you feel good, but it's not helping you to perform better. So, anytime where possible, you want to deal with that variety and that randomness.
Yeah, people hate junk balls. I think that you see in every club. Like, if you want some way to beat players that are even sometimes quite good is just giving them junk, right? Like, that's generally it. So that's an amazing product. I think it's really cool. I'm gonna use it in my training with my buddies who are more training minded. Not all of them are. So you have to find the right one who's like really keen on improving. But there are these guys around here for sure, and I think it's then a great tool to have, like, learn more drills. I mean, I'm not a coach, so I don't have all the drills in my brain like you have, Ashley. So it's that's a great thing. Thanks a lot, Ashley. I know you have a hard out and you need to go and do some coaching, right? That's the plan for the day, no? How does it look
Exactly.
for you, the rest of the hours?
Yeah. So what's the time now? 10:15. So I'll be leaving to the club in about 15 minutes. And then I've got 6.5 hours of coaching today. So it's actually a slightly shorter day today.
6.5 hours is a shorter day?
It is, yeah. Normally I've got about 8 hours of coaching. So it's I do have 2 days off court a week now. So I take Fridays and Sundays off. Fridays is kind of like an editing day. And then Sundays I try my best to keep it off. But yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy these days to have a day off, but it's good to have it in the calendar, I think.
Definitely. But it's all fun.
It's all fun, yes. We love tennis. Thanks a lot, amigo. Nice talking to you. Good luck with the tennis training deck. Check it out. Where do people find this?
thetennismentor.co.uk or on my Instagram bio. But Jones, before you go, we've got to play doubles. We're going to play an ITF, aren't we? So
Yeah, I
you
mean,
can come
up
over
to
to.
you anytime, man. I can come to the UK. You can come here. You know the drill. I'm happy to play.
Let's do a clay court one with you, and then you can come over to the UK to do some grass courts.
Yeah, we'll see which surface favors us the most. That would be
Amazing.
fun. Oh,
Thank you so much.
take care, my friend, and have a nice day.
You too.